Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well and getting some biking in at this to round out this last part of Bike Month here, this very different Bike Month. We appreciate the opportunities to continue to work with you and continue to ride through this time together. We really appreciate your Bikes Unite Bikes Unite, let me get that right, posts on social media. These have been really amazing to see, and please do keep them coming. Thanks to those of you who have joined us for the first 3 of these virtual 2020 Advocacy and Education Award ceremonies, which have happened every Thursday afternoon in May. I should say I'm Bill Nesper. I'm the Executive Director of the League of American Bicyclists, and typically I have the honor of being with you at the National Bike Summit at this time, at the annual awards dinner here in Washington, D.C., recognizing the incredible people and organizations in our movement who are working to make bicycling safe, comfortable, and accessible to all. These people and organizations take bold action for better bicycling, lead on equity and inclusion, and inspire us to do more. We know the difficulty in fully expressing our gratitude in this format, so it's GoToWebinar, but we're going to give it our best. All participants are muted now, but in the near future, I'll give you a cue to unmute yourself so that you can so the awardee can hear your cheers and applause. This is our final award for the month. Sorry, I'm getting feedback here. Give me a second. Sorry about this. Is anybody else hearing that? Sorry about this. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to push through. So this is our final award of the month, and the league it's the Advocate of the Year award, and sorry about this. Don't know what is happening. I apologize. Sorry about this, folks. See if I can get back where I was. Okay, here we go. I think this is. So it's our final award for the month. It's the Advocate of the Year award. And so, you know, as you all know, the league is composed and driven by advocates that show up, speak up, and lead by example again and again. Advocates that represent those who are underserved and underrepresented at the decision-making tables. They inspire us, they inform us about the grassroots initiative in their communities that we can advocate for them here in Washington. We place our trust in them and support their work at all levels to make bicycling better for people on every street, in every neighborhood, and in every community. This award goes to a leader of a bicycling and/or advocacy organization who has shown tireless commitment to promoting bicycling and walking in their state or community. This person goes above and beyond the call of duty to transform their state or community into a great place for biking and walking. Their time, knowledge, creativity, and commitment are at the highest standard of excellence for exemplifying the role for their peers. Our 2020 award goes to Rebecca Serna of the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. Rebecca is the Executive Director of the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. She has a master's degree from Georgia State's Andrew Young School of Policy Studies in Urban Policy and Planning and Nonprofit Management, and served as the bike ped intern with the Georgia DOT before her career in advocacy. Rebecca draws on experience as a Fulbright scholar in Bogota, Colombia, where she studied participatory planning practices and innovative public transportation projects. A nominator really sums up Rebecca's award best. Atlanta's transformation into a bicycling mecca can be traced to many individual and group efforts, but Rebecca Serna has been far and away the most consistent bicycle champion in the city that has significant multimodal challenges. Rebecca has a vision and commitment to change Atlanta for the better. Every city should be lucky to have Rebecca at the helm of their local advocacy organization. Previous awards she's received include the 2015 Women of the Year award from the Women in Transportation Seminar, the 2013 Advocate of the Year from the Alliance for Biking and Walking, and the 2013 Longleaf Award from the Georgia Conservancy. She lives in Southeast Atlanta with her husband and 3 sons, loves to read, dance, and grow food, and looks forward to the day when biking for transportation is unremarkable and everyone can move safely, easily, and sustainably throughout the city. please join me in showing your appreciation for Rebecca. Now, I'm going to try to unmute you all right now. Make sure we get this proper recognition in here. Excuse me just for a second. Here we go. All right, unmuted.
Woo! Way to go!
Yep, yep, yep.
Thanks so much. All right, you are currently unmuted now, I think, Rebecca. Anyways, say a few words, and Allison will join us to ask you some questions. I just want to remind everybody, please put in your questions so that Rebecca can take them. Thanks.
Thank you so much. This is a really big honor, and I especially love that I didn't have to get on an airplane to receive it. I'm in my bedroom here, so thank you very much to everyone at the League, everyone on staff, and everyone who is a member of the League. I really have learned so much from my peers in this field. We have tremendous networks, and I hope everyone is taking advantage of those, especially during this time when we're all working differently and thinking about how we could maybe continue to take some of the positives from this time and these ways of working differently going forward. I want to thank our staff and the team at the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. There were so many years where it was me and a part-time membership person, and now to have a staff of 5 very solid and energetic people who hold me accountable and make me work harder is just really an amazing gift, and I'm grateful for them every day. I think some of them might be on this call. Ida Santana, who's our deputy director. I should have added a deputy director role immediately. She's just really key to everything we do, and people might not see her work, but that's the power of it. It's almost invisible if you do it right, and she does it right. It's really what powers me. Stephen Spring is our outreach and education manager. Heather Lake, who's our Atlanta Streets Alive program manager, and Segura Jones, who's our advocacy and engagement coordinator, and who I work with very closely on our advocacy work. Last year was a really interesting year for our organization. One of the biggest changes is something that we recognized early on was going to be a challenge. We were working with the city, and we would go to meetings with the Department of Public Works, and they would have no idea what the Department of Planning was doing. And it just became clear that the lack of coordination and lack of vision was really holding the city back. So we started advocating internally for a Department of Transportation to be formed. And 10 years later, it happened. So definitely dream big. If you are in a city our size or larger and you don't have a Department of Transportation, we're just now really moving into year 1 of having that department and figuring that all out. And we made it a priority then to make sure it was founded on safety and equity. And I hear our DOT commissioner talking about safety and equity 100% of the time, and it's amazing. It is just exactly what our city needs as we stand up this whole new beast and this whole new department. I know it won't solve all of our problems, but I'm really proud of our work advocating for that and all of the elected officials, including our mayor, who made it happen. It's a really, really big accomplishment that I think is foundational and easy to dismiss as a bureaucratic change, but it's really a lot more than that. It's really a structural change in how we do things. The other big thing that happened last year, more internal to the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition, is that we decided to stop being the Atlanta Bicycle Only Coalition. And we took our community, we took our board through a year-long process. We had a lot of conversations about what does it mean to be advocating for sustainable transportation, and what does it mean to put community needs first. I had been feeling too much like we were a hammer and everything we saw was a nail when we were bike only. And we had started to shift into more safe streets advocacy. It felt more inclusive and more meaningful at a broader community level. I personally love to bike. I find it really empowering to get places on my own power or with a little help from my e-bike. But don't tell anybody. but I know that it's not a practical solution for every single person in the city, and it doesn't have to be that way. But if we can create a more balanced network that has transportation options that serve more people, we're all going to be better off. And so going through those conversations, we learned a lot from our community partners, including future partners, people we weren't working with very closely, because they said, well, we just see you guys as the bike people, and we're not really sure what else you're interested in, or we're not sure whether to believe you when you say that you care about safe streets primarily. So we're still the Bike Coalition, and that's what we were founded on. But as we move into this next year and our future, we're considering how do we make that change more obvious to people. We have a new strategic plan. It's on our website if you want to check it out. And if anyone's interested in talking more about that process and what we've learned from it, I leaned heavily on other organizations that have gone through it. And thank you to all of those organizations that dealt with my pestering phone calls and interviews with my board members, et cetera. So I'm happy to share what we learned from that on our website. The strategic plan lives on atlantabike.org under the About menu. Last but not least, I want to thank everyone in the Atlanta community, including especially our board, our governing board, and our advisory council. They are amazingly supportive, and they're open to nuance and reflection, and they talk to each other. And I just think there's so many inspiring things from how they work together and how this community of people who care about safe mobility and access to opportunity in Atlanta is coming together. So again, thank you for the award, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to give you this award, and I'll hand it over to Allison now to ask some questions.
Hi. Congratulations, Rebecca.
Thank you.
It's great to be here with you, asking you some questions. Let's see. So we'll start off, and congratulations on the big wins that Atlanta Bicycle Coalition had last year. It's amazing with the long work getting the DOT and then the expansion of the organization's mission. Such a long process, I'm sure, for both. And congratulations on Atlanta Bicycle Coalition's recent big wins with Vision Zero and getting the default speed limit to 25 miles per hour on local streets. I see on the website that there were a lot of partners involved in that process, and specifically many neighborhood groups. Were there always those relationships there, or was this the cultivation of those relationships? How did you go about getting those groups involved?
Yeah, we were really intentional about reaching out to partners with this campaign. It's something we started doing a couple of years ago, starting with AARP and American Heart Association, and really just wanting to get outside of our own bubble where everyone agrees with us and we already know everybody. And so those organizations have a much bigger membership, and people are interested in a lot of different issues. And so that was a great foundation 2 years ago. And then last year, we wanted to expand beyond the typical organizations that are wonderful and we appreciate greatly. But with the speed limit campaign, it just opened up opportunities to talk to different groups. And neighborhoods are a really important force in Atlanta, as I'm sure they are in many cities. And the funny thing about the neighborhoods on this list is we didn't actively go out to neighborhoods and say, hey, we want you to sign on to this initially. We were approached by neighborhoods who said, hey, we really like this. What can we do to support it? We see some other organizations, other nonprofits that you've listed. We want to do something. And so it was very exciting to see people almost like coming out of the woodwork. And a lot of them were organizations we'd worked with on something else, or they were on our mailing list. But I would say this is the first time that we really specifically worked with a broad group of neighborhood organizations, as opposed to a more specific street campaign where we were working in one neighborhood, or maybe a neighborhood planning unit, which is a slightly larger but still small grouping.
Is there a plan to maintain those relationships and grow those relationships?
Yes, informally, we consider them part of the Safe Streets Alliance here in Atlanta. And we do have a new partner on our most recent campaign, Georgia Stand Up, which focuses on community organizing in communities of color. And they joined our Essential Transportation campaign. So I was really excited to have them take part. And then we have some of the same partners that are joining us again. So the different campaigns that we run, one thing I learned was you don't have to have someone sign up to everything all at once. You can have them join a campaign, and then maybe if the next campaign isn't as relevant for their audience or their priorities, they don't have to be part of every single thing. And so that really freed us up, I think, to seek new partners.
Thanks. I'd like to really commend Atlanta Bicycle Coalition for its diverse governing board. It's true for the league, and I'm sure for many other nonprofits. So we're striving for more diversity on our board. Can you offer any advice on how the board took first, or staff, how staff and board took the first few steps in getting more diversity on your board? Was that always the case? Has it been a challenge, or was that an intentional progress that you made?
That was very intentional. Atlanta is a primarily Black city. That's where our leadership is, and that's where the city has really been shaped. And so I would say go beyond diversity, and we should all have representation. Our board should be representative. Our staff should be representative. And that's really where we're at, and where our goal is. But the process to get there, particularly if your organization is not diverse to begin with, it does take a lot of intention behind it. And so one thing we did several years ago, Atiba MB1 was our board chair at the time, and he's been involved in bike communities and community work in Atlanta for decades. He took our board through a process of shared learning about equity and diversity and inclusion, and we adopted some principles. So it felt like we were moving in that direction. And then 2 years ago, our current board chair, Nadia Wada, led us through, I would say, a more intense process. We had trainings that the board went through, trainings that the staff went through. The staff trainings were more intensive, and we did this over the course of a year. We would meet for several hours at a time with the consultant, and I just found it really valuable. I think other staff members did as well, based on their feedback. And it's something we're trying to find the funding to incorporate into our board development each year, because people are coming from different places, different backgrounds, different experiences, and equity has become such a buzzword. You have to really know what you mean by equity, and in order to make it real in the work.
Thanks. Okay, so you've been at Atlanta Bicycle Coalition for almost 13 years. Is that correct? Congratulations on that. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen during those years, both within the organization and across Atlanta? And what about those changes you've seen would you say the role of the executive director is to be a great leader? Is executive director being a great leader or a great manager, or both?
Well, speaking first of the changes, one of my board members sent me an article the other day, and I saw the headline and I thought, oh, I didn't know that was being written, but I thought it was current. And it was something like, Atlanta makes progress, but still has far to go to catch up to other cities. I was like, yeah, that's fair. It was from 1993. So I feel like that's been the wrap on us for a little while now. Progress is slow, and luckily other cities are making really fast progress, so that's a good thing. Don't begrudge any of you any of that goodness. But I do feel like we need to speed up the changes. It's been, the foundational changes have happened more quickly in the last 3 years. We created the role of a chief bicycle officer. We helped fund that through a grant. We're 5 years into that role now, and it's fully funded by the city. I think that was a really foundational change. And then with the Department of Transportation being formed last year, I just several years ago realized we weren't going to get the infrastructure changes that we wanted unless the foundational elements were there. And so was several years of slogging through that. And funding is the third piece, of course, having funding sources that can be tapped into. So those are some of the changes. They're more behind the scenes, and I'm really ready to see more of those changes on the streets, and I think a lot of people are. But I do see people making changes to their behavior faster than the infrastructure. That's been pretty consistently the case throughout my time here. I vividly remember the first time I was on a street corner on my way home on my bike, stopped at a red light, and I looked at all four corners, and there was a woman on a bike on every corner of that intersection. And I thought, oh, I don't know any of you. This is really good. This is a good sign. This is the indicator thing they were talking about.
Yeah.
And that was about 5 years ago. And then
And all women, huh?
And all women. Yeah, I thought that was
That's cool.
that was the part of it. That led me to believe that the changes had been made. Enough changes had been made to make it encouraging to ride a bike. And then great manager, great leader. You got to have both in your organization, but I don't think that I'm both. And that's the deputy director role that I mentioned. I think it's important to have a leadership position, someone who can complement your strengths and weaknesses. And so I think, getting large enough to have a leadership team is really important. We're still kind of small for that, but having that deputy director role has been really important to us from the balancing the management and the leadership side of things. I think they're different executive functions. Maybe someone can do both of them, but it's hard to do both at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, so for all of us who want to visit Atlanta, once travel is safe, once we're kind of back to going other places, what 2 rides or events should we come to? And then there's that second part, but I'll leave it at the 2 rides and events we should come to.
Okay. Well, I don't know when you can come to this, but you should definitely put Atlanta Streets Alive on your calendar whenever it is. We organize our Open Streets initiative here in Atlanta, and we're planning a weekly pilot for TBD. It was planned for October. We don't know if we're going to be able to do that yet. Our city is using a data-driven approach towards reopening and gatherings, which we fully support and I think is amazing and the right way to go. But it means we can't get an event permit right now. And so whenever we get to pull that trigger on the weekly pilot of Open Streets, you should definitely come to Atlanta then, because it's going to be on our signature street, Peachtree, not to be confused with all the other Peachtree streets. We like to name them all Peachtree, but we'll point you in the right direction. And the other thing, it's not really an event, but people know the Beltline, not to be confused with the Beltway. And the Beltline continues to grow and expand. And so I think it's worth checking out when you are here in town.
Okay. And as you know, bikes and food go hand in hand so many times together. So the second part is, what 2 meals or restaurants should we also hit while we're doing the rides?
Yeah. Well, I was telling you earlier, I got this. I wasn't sure if this was a real happy hour, so I brought an unopened beverage just in case. And I got this at a pop-up at the Spindle, which is a bike retail, bike clothing and apparel / accessories shop that has pop-up restaurants behind it. So my abuela's kitchen was doing a pop-up, and I got the most amazing empanadas, and empanadas are so much work, and it was so great to have someone else have made them for me. So that's one that I highly recommend. And then there's a restaurant in my neighborhood called Le Petit Marché, and it is a small breakfast bistro, very popular. Expect to wait in line once we have lines again. And it's a great stopping point for any bike ride that you're on. It draws a lot of people on bikes, and it is also a Black-owned business that does a lot of things to support the community. So Le Petit Marché.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks. Okay. The Atlantic Bicycle Coalition has a campaign for safe streets for essential transportation. Can you talk a little bit about how you came up with the asks in that campaign? I'll leave it at that, and then there's a couple follow-ups to that too.
Sure. So what we're trying to do is focus on the outcomes that we want in the Atlanta Department of Transportation budget. So it's essentially a budget campaign, but a budget campaign is a little bit too boring and not focused enough on the things that people want out of the budget, because the whole point of a budget is to do things and build things. And so with all the conversations that have been happening about slow streets, closed streets, open streets, physical distancing lanes, social distancing lanes, there's been this really hopefully healthy swirl of ideas. And we said we don't think lane closures, street closures that are for create local traffic only streets are an appropriate response during a pandemic. There's too many unknowns and variables. But what we do think is appropriate and needs to be the continued focus is on long-term changes that make improvements for people who have to go somewhere. Not all of us have to go somewhere. I have the opportunity to work out of my home, and it's been seamless, other than my children being here. But a lot of people have jobs that they have to go to in person. So let's keep the focus on what those needs are. I think for a lot of people who can work remotely, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed these really stark class divides. And people who rely on transit tend to be in lower income neighborhoods. They tend to be further away from the job centers and have a whole slew of transportation challenges that have just been made even harder by having to worry about getting a virus on the bus. And in Atlanta, we've had a significant percentage of bus routes cut. So we really wanted to keep the focus on people who are relying on transit and trying to figure out what can we do to make that a little bit easier. You shouldn't have to walk in the street to get to the bus. You might be walking further now because your first route was cut. You have to walk to get to the next one. What can we do that's faster and quicker and take more things in-house in this time of necessary budget cuts so that we can meet those essential needs? So I know there's a lot in there, but those are some of the guiding lights for us, as well as thinking about schools reopening. That's another prioritization mechanism that we want the DOT to use is think ahead, kids walk and bike to school, and there's a lot of encouragement programs in some communities, but in other communities they're walking and biking because they have to. And how can we make sure that those kids get to school safely and plan ahead now while school is not open?
Yeah. The second part of the question, which you touched on pretty well, is how you balance the immediate need for space versus the long-term need for community participation and buy-in for changes to neighborhood streets.
Yeah. Well, we are lucky/unlucky in that we have probably 80 to 100 miles of projects that are planned but not built that have community engagement for the most part. And so our take has been build the things that people have already had a chance to weigh in on. Now is not a good time to launch a community engagement process if you want it to be equitable. Now, if you only want to hear from people who, again, have that privilege to work remotely, we've got some time on our hands and are online. So that's something, but it's not going to be an equitable process right now. You can't go to where people are at, which is the primary way that you get more equitable engagement. And so I think the message isn't don't build anything, it's build the right things that people have already talked about.
You've had some really interesting experiences, Rebecca, before working at Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. Can you tell us more about your Fulbright Fellowship in Bogota and how it has informed your advocacy work since then?
Sure. The main thing that I took from that amazing opportunity and experience was the street that I lived on was part of Ciclovia, where they opened 75 kilometers of streets every single Sunday. 1 million people participate in a mega city of 8 million. And it's just so normal that no one told me about it at first. It was just like, this is just Sunday. This is how it is on Sunday. I'm going to visit my grandma. I'm going to get there on, Ciclovia. I'm going to take my bike. And I just thought that was really amazing. It was so much a part of the culture. And then when I got back here and I would give talks or things and people would ask me how I felt about Lance Armstrong. And I thought, oh man, this is not what I'm about. going to change this conversation somehow. No offense if you are, but that's just not what we were trying to do. And so we felt like open streets was that big idea that had the potential to transform a culture. And we just celebrated 10 years of Atlanta Streets Alive. And I'm really proud of it. It's one of the things I'm most proud of during my time at the Atlanta Bicycle Coalition. And it started out in a very, very grassroots way. Bunch of volunteers around a table, and then a city council member showed up halfway through the meeting. It's like, hey, what can I do? And really helped make that first open street happen.
Wow.
That was an amazing ride. But I often also take heart knowing that it took 30 years. You know, they're 30 years into their open streets program. So these are long-term transformations that we're talking about. And I think the next transformation we need is reclaiming the sidewalk as part of the street, because too often we see the sidewalk as, oh, a nice accessory. It's not. It's a basic part of a good street.
Definitely. What advice do you have for new bike advocates who want to get involved in making their community more bike friendly, but don't know where to begin? And another way to phrase that is, how would you answer change for someone in a community like Atlanta, where there's already a strong group and advocacy scene, versus in a community that doesn't have much existing bike advocacy yet?
Yeah, first I would tell them to check to see if there's a state organization. Those can be a great resource in getting started. Here in Atlanta, we have Georgia Bikes, and they are really an amazing and very supportive partner, and they support all the city groups in a lot of ways. So shout out to Elliot for that and his team. And then, you know, when you're just getting started, I think people will do one of two things. Some people will come in and assume nothing has been done and think that they're going to save everything. And then other people will assume, well, I don't know anything. How could I possibly have something to contribute? So if both of those folks could move to the middle a little bit and know that they do have something to contribute, but at the same time, some things might already be in the works or have been accomplished, then I think that everyone can really play a tremendous role, really at any point in time. Like if there's someone out there today who isn't involved with the Atlanta Bike Coalition and wants to be, and they email me, you know, I respond to the info@Atlanta Bike email. I shouldn't tell you that. They're going to get a response, and I'm going to try and figure out a way for them to get involved. There are a lot of informal groups here in Atlanta that people have their activism go through. There are a lot of Facebook groups. And so I think just kind of embedding yourself, figuring out what community exists first, and then what your role could be in supporting and advancing advocacy within it. And not ignoring the political process, because that is a huge part of it. I think it's easy to just focus on the social media side of things and talking to people who agree with you and forgetting that we have elected officials that are making decisions.
Okay, so this is the last question, unless anyone types something else into the chat box. We still have time, so feel free to add more questions. But here it is. So over your years of working for the betterment of Atlanta cycling, have the efforts gotten easier or harder? Is it all city administration dependent?
Definitely easier because there's more people involved, and it's easier to tell who wants to be involved. I think in the early days, this is probably as much a comment on me as anything else, but I just didn't quite know which way to turn, what to look to. It was hard to know what other cities to look to. I didn't know about some of the cities that were closer to our size that have become an important part of my peer network. And it, you know, you can't always point to what is happening in New York City and have it be relevant in your city. So having that wider range of cities to look to has made it really helpful. And I think, you know, groups like the League and others have done a lot to highlight that work and create this environment where you can reach out to someone in the city you think might have something to share with you or that you could learn from. So that's a big part of it. And I just forgot the rest of the question.
The second part was, is it all city administration dependent? The ease or the difficulty of their work?
I'm in my third city administration, so it's definitely not all city mayoral administration dependent, although it does make a huge difference when the mayor is in your corner. But one thing to keep in mind that I've learned from trainings, I think through the league again, is that elected officials might support you on one policy, but then have to oppose something else, and it may be for policy-driven reasons, or it may be for other reasons. And sometimes you're privy to those, sometimes you're not. So cultivating that support and having an ongoing commitment to cultivating that support is the key. I think some people will write off an elected official, or conversely over rely and assume they have their support. And you really have to work to get them to a yes on any given thing that you're doing.
Thank you. Great insight, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really awesome. I just want to say, big thanks from all of us who are so inspired by your leadership and everything you've done in your time there. You are, your tenacity, your willingness to like dig in and continue to do this work, and it's really awesome. As somebody who has gone to Atlanta over the last 15 years and ridden there, I just really applaud you and your team and the amazing network that you've built. So thanks for doing what you've done. And you are our final awardee of this National Bike Month. So congratulations once again. I just want to thank everybody for participating in all of these, and for today, for Allison for doing this, and Rebecca for your time answering these questions. Thank you all for asking those questions and doing the work that you do. We are gonna keep doing virtual meetings, and so stay tuned to our social media channels and our e-newsletters, and hopefully we can help make some of those connections for you and your advocacy as well. The National Bike Challenge is still going, and there's still time. You still have through September to ride, so please consider signing up if you haven't already. And thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.